Hello everyone, my name is Aline Boyd. I'm a pianist from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'm extremely honored because today I'll be interviewing pianist and Professor Michael Lewin. Professor Michael Lewin is the head of department and professor at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. Thank you so much, Professor, for accepting my invitation. I feel very honored. Thank you so much. So Michael Lewin is one of America's most active and popular pianists, bringing charisma, virtuosity to audience in over 30 countries. He was the prize winner um, in the Franz Liszt International Piano Competition in 1986. Also, he was the winner in the American Pianist Association Award in the William Capel International Piano Competition. His recordings have won a Grammy Award and a Round Glass Music Award. So thank you so much, Professor. So we are going now to our first question. I would like to know more about your love for the Brahms Concerto No. 1 in D minor, Opus 15. You have mentioned in some of videos that you remember hearing for the first time when you were a child, a little boy, and you were touched by the power, the majesty, and the humanity of this piece. So can you explain a little bit more about it, please?
I don't know. I heard this piece first as a child, and it made just a tremendous impression on me. To perform it is, well, I mean, almost any concerto is a satisfying, fulfilling experience. I mean, any great concerto. But the Brahms concerti, and for me, the D minor in particular, it just covers so much ground, and it allows you to show your pianism, show your heart, show your soul, show tremendous architecture. It's just so moving. The slow movement is so touching. The first movement is so massive and so just tremendous, and I don't know why. I mean, I just have always felt a very special attachment to this piece, and for some reason I feel always acutely that it's a great privilege every time I have the chance to play it.
It's so wonderful that you have heard the Brahms Concerto No. 1 for the first time performed by the great pianist Leon Fleischer. So this was when you were a child. You had the opportunity to work in this concerto with Leon Fleischer years later. How was that experience?
I learned the two Brahms concerti when I was a freshman and a sophomore at Juilliard. And I just wanted to play those concerti. Around me, everybody was learning the Prokofiev and Rachmaninoff concerti. But I wanted to do the two Brahms, and so I learned them and I've played them on and off. And then, then later when I studied with Leon Fleischer, one of the first things that I brought to him was the two Brahms concerti, and I already felt that I played it well. I mean, and after working on it with him, I felt like I sort of now every secret of this piece had been open to me, and I mean, his performance is still as great as any that's ever been put down on record. And I remember I said to him, Leon, now I own the Brahms D minor concerto. And he said to me, Michael, all we can do is rent it.
You have mentioned that you knew you want to be a concert pianist since you were 5 years old. After hearing the wonderful pianist Arturo Benedetti Michelangeli playing, could you give more details, please?
Childhood memories, for some reason, and not that many memories of my father when I was a child, but for some reason I grew up. I was living on Long Island, which is about a half hour out of Manhattan, and he got tickets and took me, just the two of us. We went to Carnegie Hall and we heard Michelangelo, and which was a miracle in and of itself because he always canceled all his concerts in the States anyway. So the fact that he even showed up was already something. But we got the last tickets in the very top, last balcony of Carnegie Hall, so it was very far to look down. And I remember every detail of that evening. There was something about everybody gathered, the hall being so full and so, and the anticipatory feeling and excitement of all the audience. And then the stage door opened and this handsome Italian man with his hair slicked back and his mustache and his white tie and tails, and he walked to the piano. He was very elegant, and he flicked his tails, he sat down, you know, he thought, and he played. And somehow, I mean, every note that he played somehow just, I can't describe how it felt, but I felt like this is what I wanted to do. This is what I wanted to be. This ability to sit at the piano and make this music that can touch so many people and have them want to hear you and hear it. And so I don't know whether actually I recognized at that moment what I was, or whether I made up what I was. I liked the whole thing, you know. And but there it was. And so then I pestered my parents to get a piano. We didn't have a piano. And on my 6th birthday, they got a piano, and I started lessons. And pretty much I never really considered doing anything else. I never had that moment where I think, well, what if I did this or what if I did that? I mean, there are other things that I love and interest me, but I pretty much, at that moment, at 5 years old, I sort of decided that that's what I was going to be, and I just stayed with that, you know.
So you had some mentors and have mentioned that Leon Fleischer was the most, not important, but the most influential mentor to you. For how many years did you have lessons with him? And I would like also to know in which terms did he shape or give the language to you to be the pianist you are today?
Fleischer was my last teacher.
Mm-hmm.
A number of teachers before that, and I'm sure that all of them shaped me and influenced me, maybe because he was the last one, and everything that had happened to me up until that moment, and somehow he helped me he showed me a way to organize music and to make sense of all music, you know, to how to organize the rhythms and how to organize structure and how to, maybe I remember him the most because he was the last, and it had always been my dream to study with him. I guess I was with him for 3 years. I was finished with school already. And also we were together in France at a festival for the summer before we started. So I already knew him and we were friendly. Yeah, but you know, when I started, apparently, I don't remember this, but I went through a bunch of teachers right away in the beginning and didn't really like any of them. And then finally I found a wonderful teacher. His name was Edmund Arcus. And he was a graduate student at Juilliard at that time, a student of Madame Levine, Rosina Levine. And I loved Edmund so much, and it was wonderful to see him and to be with him, and he made studying such a joy. And so I guess I was getting, and his mother was a piano teacher also, so he knew he was a wonderful teacher in every way. But, you know, one of the things that he gave me when I was little was that sense of fun and joy of playing. And I think that that's so important for teachers that teach kids. You know, I don't teach kids. I've never taught kids. I'm petrified of teaching kids. But I think almost the most important thing with teaching kids is for them to have fun, for them to like to play, for them to like you, want to be with you, want to see you every week, you know, want to please you. And I stayed with Edmund till I was 15, actually. And so I guess I was getting, in some ways, a Russian schooling because he was a student of Levin in Russian school. Um, and then for a few years, while I was still studying with him, I worked with Sylvia Rabinoff, who was a very well-known pianist, and her husband, Benno Rabinoff, was a very famous violinist, student of Leopold Auer. And they had this great big apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, sort of like it was like walking into another world, you know. And Heifetz would call, and you know, she would be talking about William Capell and this and that, and the concerts, and they'd go off to play concerts, and it was the first time that I actually was in contact with people who had big concert careers and knew all sorts of famous musicians and had these personal stories, and you know, it was just very exciting. And I studied piano and improvisation and theory with her. And then finally I went to Juilliard Pre-College for my last 3 years of high school. And I'd sort of hesitated. I'd waited as long as I could to go to Juilliard Pre-College because I sort of knew that I was going to go to the college. And as it was, I ended up spending so many years at Juilliard, but I didn't want to just spend 15 years at Juilliard. And I knew that I was doing pretty well because when I would enter competitions and such, I would be doing well and having, you know, success against students that were currently in the pre-college. So I knew that my level I wasn't concerned about my level. I didn't really want to leave Edmund. But then, so for the last 3 years of high school, I would go in on Saturday. I would take the train from Great Neck to Manhattan by myself, and it was very exciting. And everything is on Saturday in the pre-college. So you'd have lesson and chamber music and chorus and some theory. And, you know, so for the first time I was in the company of other gifted musicians, you know. And for the first time I was playing chamber music with, you know, other kids my age. And it was just great, you know. And I studied with Jane Carlson during those years. And she was, what I remember about Jane Carlson was that, first of all, she insisted that I be more disciplined. That, you know, as far as she was concerned, it was enough of me coasting on talent. I had to play the right notes. I had to everything needed to be clean. You know, I had to be professional. And the other thing that I'm eternally grateful to her for was her insistence on beautiful sound. She would not let me make an ugly sound. It was just not permissible. It was just, you know, and that's the way I am now myself, hopefully for myself, but certainly for students. I mean, I recoil if I hear sound that isn't nice, isn't beautiful, isn't considered. So there I was, and so then it was time to go to college, and I went to Juilliard, and I decided that I wanted to study at that time with Erwin Freundlich, because actually, for me, already at that age, I pretty much could play anything. I pretty much, you know, I wasn't afraid of any piece. I was playing big pieces, and I wasn't that concerned with physically playing the piano, you know. So I wanted to go to study with somebody who was a great brain, a great intellect, and a person who had, I thought, a sort of a philosophical approach to music and understood different styles. And I'd never played French music, and he was so expert at French music. And so I entered his class, and I was with him for 3.5 years. And then he died. And that was very difficult, to have your teacher die. And it was a very difficult period in general, because my father died, and my teacher died, and my grandparents died, and this was all in a very short period of time. And anyway, I came back to school, and I went to Adele Marcus, the famous Adele Marcus. And it was probably a mistake for me to go to her. She was a wonderful teacher about playing the piano, about sound, about pianism, Russian music. This was real Russian school. I mean, she had been Joseph Levin's assistant, and she was a great pianist herself, although not really for the public. And but she was also very difficult, and it was a bad time for me, and I wasn't really in the mood to put up with some of her stuff. And so, without going into too much about it, I was with her for 2, maybe 3 years. The school gave me a piano. They had 6 Steinways that they would rent to like the favorite students for $1 a year. And when I knew when I left school, I wouldn't have a place to practice. I wouldn't have a piano. So I stayed in school for 2 more years so I could have this Steinway from Juilliard to practice in my apartment. And then after that, I was done with school per se. So I got a bachelor's and a master's degree. And I did a year in what they called professional studies. I guess I'm just giving you the whole saga of my studies. Remember when it was, but a few years later, or at some point, I went to France to study with Ivan Lefebvre, who was Courtaulds' assistant and right hand, and a great exponent of the French style. And that was eye-opening for me to live in France and she was in her 80s when I studied with her. She was this tiny woman with this gigantic hat, chain-smoking cigarettes with a filter, and always screaming and yelling. And we met for early breakfast the morning after I arrived in Paris, and we went and had breakfast together. And so I ordered coffee, and she ordered a brandy. It must have been 8 o'clock in the morning, and she was having her brandy and smoking, and I was like, wow, this is a different world. You know, it was very great. She had a huge imagination, and also she knew about French music. She knew, I mean, she'd known Debussy and with Courtaulds, and she would tell me all the things that let's say, especially Debussy, because that's what was the particular interest I had with her, although I played many composers for her. She would tell me what Debussy said to do this, and this is this, and he didn't like this in the edition, he wanted you to change this. So there are a lot of things that I know that, that were very sacred things for me to learn. And when later I had the chance to make 2 recordings of Debussy, it was it felt like a coming together of a circle, Anyway, then I came back to the States, and and then I got a Rockefeller grant to study with Fleischer, and so I would commute from New York to Baltimore, and I would have 2-hour private lessons with him, which was very unusual because most of his teaching was in group settings. The students, they'd be in groups of 3 or 4, I don't know exactly, and they would all sit for each other's lessons, which is a very European way of teaching. It was the way Schnabel taught his teacher. And it's very great because you can hear, the master talk about other repertoire, not just what you're playing, and you learn a lot of things. But I didn't do that because I wasn't at Peabody. I would have my lessons at Peabody, but I wasn't in school there. So I would have, long sessions with him, and I would take the train and have my lesson and take the train back to New York. And it was just somehow, as I say, I mean, it just sort of, that was, in terms of my studying, this was the sort of the denouement of it all. It was the wrapping up of everything. And I went through a tremendous amount of music with him. Every 2 weeks I would usually have a lesson, usually every 2 weeks, and I'd bring another big piece, and with the exception of the first piece I ever played for him, which was the Schumann Fantasy. And I knew that he didn't like to hear pieces twice, or at least his students all told me, never bring him something twice, And so after the Schumann Fantasy lesson, my mind was completely blown, and there was so many new concepts. And I said, Leon, is it okay if I bring it back to you next week so I understand everything that you wanted me to learn? And he said, of course, I would love to hear it again. And he said, I don't know why students never bring me this piece twice. And I was sort of laughing because the students all tell each other, don't ever bring him a piece twice. But then after that, actually, I never brought him a piece twice. I was just plowing through probably 10, 15 concertos. I mean, half a dozen Beethoven sonatas, all sorts of things, even things you wouldn't think of as Fleischer repertoire, and Prokofiev and Chopin, all kinds of things. And everything, for me, everything he had so much value because he was such a great musician, even if it wasn't his core repertoire. The students also said things like, don't ever ask him about his hand, you know, because of course he couldn't use his right hand. And I thought, this makes no sense. Was one of the greatest pianists who's ever lived. His career was taken away from him. This is an unimaginable tragedy. And of course, everybody is completely obsessed with how Leon's hand is doing. So of course I would ask him, how is your hand? And he was always so grateful when I would ask about it. And again, he'd say, you know, I never know why my students never ask me how my hand is doing. I mean, it's the biggest thing in my life and they never ask me. Well, I didn't understand either, but I just, you know, I wasn't one of his students in the traditional way, so we had a different relationship, you know, and, you know, we would go out for dinner, at lunch. It was a great Spanish restaurant in Baltimore called Tio Pepe, which unfortunately is closed now, but we used to love to go there. And anyway, it was a good dream for me, that relationship.
So you were the prize winner of the very first Liszt piano competition in 1986. Besides practicing too much, how was the preparation for this competition?
The Netherlands is, well, now it's a very special competition for me. I mean, my student, Alex Polyakov, was a winner after me. I've gone to judge the competition. There's a sense of family with the winners from all the years. We're all friends. Liszt has always been sort of a very important composer for me and person for me, actually. Just the person of Liszt. I mean, how complicated and how great and how contradictory he was, and fundamentally such a I mean, the larger than life and the ultimate pianist, and so much music. I mean, he wrote over 1,500 pieces for just the piano, not to mention orchestral music and choral music, and you know, and he's always been a tremendous inspiration for me as a person. You know, how he was with students, and how he was with composers, and how he tried to help people, and all sorts of things. I mean, I try for him to be a role model in many ways. I mean, of course, I can't be Liszt, but, you know, I can learn from him. And the competition, the thing that was so interesting about it was, well, it was all Liszt. I mean, first of all, so there are only a few competitions that they call monograph competitions that are one composer. I mean, there's the Chopin competition, the Liszt competition, the Beethoven competition. I don't think there are any other competitions that are all one composer. And they're always very, very intent upon making you play unknown Liszt or relatively unknown Liszt. So if you choose the B minor sonata in one round, you have to play a bunch of unknown pieces also, and all of this. And so I learned a lot of, actually, even though I played already a lot of Liszt, but I learned a lot of new Liszt for that competition. And I always feel like I'm learning new Liszt pieces, not just myself, but hearing them, teaching them, discovering them, and judging the competition actually is always exposure to Liszt pieces that I might not have in my repertoire or may not know very well. So, I mean, it's almost a limitless fount of repertoire because he's so many styles of composition. But yeah, that was a tremendous honor and important thing in my career. That was my last competition, the Liszt competition. And so for a few years, I was sort of known particularly for playing Liszt. And my first recording was a Liszt recording, and oh, I played so many performances of the E-flat piano concerto, I can't tell you. I used to joke that my first car, I bought a Volvo, and I used to say I bought it with the money from playing the Liszt concerto. used to call it my Liszt concerto car. I just, I played so many Liszt concertos, and I just took the money and I bought a car, and yeah. So, but now, I mean, of course, I still play Liszt, but I'm very, very curious about repertoire, and I'm always learning new things and trying new things and building my repertoire, because the treasures of the piano repertoire never end, and nobody can even touch a fraction of them in a lifetime.
You have mentioned that a big part of your repertoire is Liszt. You were influenced by his music, the man, his life, philosophy. You also mentioned, this was in the lecture that I had the opportunity to watch last week, that Liszt is like a mirror, and that his B minor sonata reveals the personality of the performer. Can you explain a little bit more about it, please?
Liszt still has a reputation, a little bit as being, because some of the music is so showy, as being trashy. It's just a vehicle for showing off, for narcissistic virtuosos. But actually, when you hear, let's just say, a Hungarian Rhapsody, in the hands of some pianists, it can sound so aristocratic and so elegant and so charming, and the virtuosity is so for a matter of style. And you can hear another pianist, and they're just banging and showing you how fast their octaves are, and they don't really understand any of gypsy things. And the Liszt Sonata in particular, I think, because in some ways that's his greatest masterpiece for piano, and I think is so autobiographical, and a performance of it also becomes so autobiographical, I think. And yes, I think anyway, you should feel to some extent, when you hear an artist play, you should feel, I don't know, I'd like to think that you have some sense of who they are. Not just how they play Chopin or whatever, but they're sharing their emotions, and also their aesthetic, and maybe their philosophy. I mean, music can show so many things, and this is one of the reasons, I think, why some performers become so beloved, because not just they touch you, but you have a sense of them, a very profound sense, even though they may have never said a word to you. It's just through the language of music. And I think that Liszt, and the B minor sonata in particular, shows this a lot. I mean, I feel when I hear a performance of the Liszt sonata, I always feel like I have a sense of who that person is.
You have performed the Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue 50 times. How is the experience of performing this piece so many times? Are there any of those performers that are more remarkable to you? If so, how?
When I grew up, I never considered myself an American pianist. I mean, I didn't really at that time play that much American music. I was just, I don't know what I thought I was, a European, a Russian, or whatever. I just didn't really identify myself in a nationalistic way. And then at some point, I don't know, I was asked to play Rhapsody in Blue, which of course I love. I mean, everybody loves Rhapsody in Blue. I mean, that's the thing about Rhapsody in Blue. Everywhere, all over the world, they love Gershwin, and
Yes.
especially Rhapsody in Blue. And now I play also the Concerto in F and the Second Rhapsody, which is not played enough, but is a very nice piece. But somehow, I don't know whether other people looked at me as an American pianist. And it took a while before everybody looking at me as an American pianist, before I started to feel, oh, I guess I'm an American pianist. I mean, even though I'm not, somebody who was my parents weren't from America. I didn't grow up. I mean, it's not like I'm sixth generation American. No, I'm not. But still, I mean, I was born here. And anyway, so I started playing Rhapsody in Blue, and somehow the piece is popular and people want to hear it, and maybe they liked how I played it. Yeah, so I would just have played it so many times. And I've played it in Egypt. I've played it in Greece. I've played it in Italy. I've played it, I don't know, all over the United States, all over Canada. I've played it, I can't remember where I've played it. I've played it, seems like everywhere. Probably 10 or 15 countries, I don't know. And with many great conductors, actually, which is sort of a waste because you don't really need a great conductor for Rhapsody in Blue. I'd rather have a great conductor to do, I don't know, a Beethoven concerto. But nonetheless, every time I'm asked to do Rhapsody in Blue, I'm totally annoyed. I'm like, why do I have to play this piece again? And then I think, well, actually, when you're actually playing it, it's just super fun. It's just so much fun to play it. And, a piece takes 13 or 14 minutes, and I get paid the same as if I'm playing Rachmaninoff concerto for 35 minutes, and everybody loves it.
You were determined to have no editing. How was that experience?
I've made so many recordings, and I embrace the technology of recording. I mean, of course, one wants to have a long takes or the feeling of long line and all this, but I appreciate the fact that I can drop a note in if I need to, or whatever, that I can just fix things. But anyway, when I did the first recording, it was the Liszt recording, and I had it in my mind that I was just going to play and I would try to get things done in one take. And so I started with the transcription of Ave Maria, the Schubert song in the Liszt transcription. And I had a beautiful piano, and my best friend was the recording engineer, and the president of the company was there. It was my debut recording, and so I start playing Ave Maria, a piece which I played quite a lot, actually. I'd learned it actually for the Liszt competition, and it just was not going very well. I just kept trying and trying, and I couldn't really create the magic that I wanted, and I was very conscious of the microphones everywhere and of posterity, that this performance would be unchangeable, and people would identify me with it or associate me with it, and if it was good, it was good. If it was bad, they'd think I was horrible. Anyway, I must have, for an hour, I must have tried playing it and just being in a terrible mood, getting more and more frustrated, and then I got up and I started walking around, and everybody was telling me, calm down, and I was furious. This is my first recording. I'm never going to even get one piece recorded. And I remembered Rubinstein. He used to say he would play his concerts or make a recording, and he would think about one person. And no matter how many people were in the hall or what was going on, he would just focus on that one person, and he would play for them. And then he felt like he could communicate, and he could not be nervous. And I mean, of course, it was usually the most beautiful woman he could find or focus on in the audience. And the piano technician who was there to take care of the piano during the sessions had brought his girlfriend with him to the sessions. She wasn't a musician. I don't know who she was. I never met her. But she was outside, and I thought, all these people, they're all recording and producing and editing and doing these things, and I'm not liking playing for them. So I went outside and I found this girlfriend of the piano tuner, and I said, would you please come and listen to me play? I'll play for you. And she must have thought I was crazy, but she said, okay, sure. So she came in and she played, and I put her in a certain place so I could sort of, out of the corner of my eye, see her. And I played Ave Maria, and I got it in one take. It was just, I still am actually very fond of that performance. And now, the rest of the recording, I think, had plenty of editing. But at least one piece out of one record, I can say, it was one take. It's very hard to do a 5-minute piece, in one take. Because it's not just a matter of wrong notes, but making everything as beautiful as it can be, as perfect, everything matching, or no noise from the pedal or outside noise. I mean, there's so many factors. I mean, most recordings, you know, unfortunately, are edited a lot. You know. Anyway, that's my story about.
So your
No
recordings receive extraordinary critical praise. Is there any recording that has a different meaning to you, a special meaning to you?
I'll tell you what I'm doing now. I'm doing, you know, as I said, I'm always looking for new sort of repertoire projects. And I've always liked very much Spanish music and Latin music. And I like it anyway, just I like Latin music, I mean. And so I've been learning and playing quite a lot of Latin music, and I have a project going to make an all Latin American CD. And I was trying to get as many different countries represented as possible. So, of course, you're Brazil, and Argentina, and Uruguay, and Venezuela, and Puerto Rico, and, you know, Mexico, a lot of countries. And I've made half of the recording, and then the coronavirus hit. So when I can go back to New York, I'll finish the other half. But I've really been enjoying this project a lot. Of course, the two countries with the most music are Brazil and Argentina, because they're the two biggest countries. And so I wanted to not have like you know, half the record be Brazilian music or what have you. But for Brazil, I think I did, well, this transcription of Tico Tico Tico, called the Tango Odeon, encore, that I played when I was a child by Octavio Pinto, called Run Run, from Cenas de las Infantas. Do you know this? Children's pieces. But it's a really cute encore, with alternating hands. It takes a minute. And I'm not sure, I think those are the three from Brazil. But I've really loved learning these pieces and playing them. And audiences love this music. They love the rhythms and the healthy. There's something about Latin music that's so healthy, you know. It's not so tortured like so much Western music is, you know. It's, even when it's sad, it's direct, you know. It's not just like, it's just, you know. And, you know, and so anyway, so this is my latest project. This, I don't know what I'm going to call it, but there's some great repertoire in there. Music by Osvaldo Golijov and, Mexican Hat Dance, transcription by Earl Wild, tons of things, Ginastera Sonata, all sorts of things. But you asked me about recordings. I mean, I'm sort of fond of all of them. I mean, you know, they're sort of my children, you know. But some of them are because I wanted to make that repertoire, and some of them, a company may have said, could you please record this or record that, or I did some theme albums. So there's a record, If I Were a Bird, which is all pieces based on birds, which is actually nice, that record. And then there's one, Piano Phantoms, everything is goblins and ghosts and things. And then some normal repertoire, Russian record, and, you know, Debussy records, and I don't know, all sorts of things, I don't remember. Scarlatti, actually I liked that project a lot. The Naxos was doing, I don't know if they ever finished this project, but they were doing the complete Scarlatti sonatas, and they were doing them on the piano. And they decided to do it quickly. They would ask all of the pianists who recorded for Naxos to each do a record of Scarlatti sonatas. And I was the second person they asked, so the first person had already chosen, I don't know, 20 of them. And so I could choose any, I ended up doing 19 sonatas, any sonatas that I wanted from the remaining 520 sonatas. And that was such a joy to read through all Scarlatti sonatas and get to know them at a much deeper level and choose my favorites. And I like the ones that I got to record. I guess it was, I feel I'm sort of recording the complete piano music of Charles Griffiths was a special thing because, well, he's a wonderful composer, and nobody had ever recorded his complete music. And in part because there were a bunch of unpublished pieces that the executor of the estate Donna Anderson, had control over, and she wouldn't let anybody record. They needed her permission. And I don't know, I went out to her home in upstate New York and talked to her, and we spent an afternoon together, and then she said, okay, fine, you can record all these pieces. And it was just, you know, it was I was so happy that she allowed me to be the first one to do this. And it's all the piano music and also the two piano pieces. So that's sort of I think an important set of records because they're sort of historic, I mean, in a sense, that to do all of that repertoire. I don't know, yeah, it's been a lot of, I think the recordings to some extent are reflective of, you know, the fact that I like a lot of music. I play a lot of music. I like a lot of different styles. And I mean, if somebody said to me, you know, make 10 Beethoven recordings, I would be absolutely thrilled. But, you know, I'm very fortunate that I've recorded throughout my career and my life, and, you know, that I've had this chance, you know, to do it, and that other people pay for it, you know, so.
So you also play Latin American music. Ginastera, Villa Lobos, Nazaré. How do you feel about it? Which Latin American composer do you like the most?
Well, I don't know, I mean, to play? I mean, I don't know, I think Ginastera is a very important composer. I think Villa-Lobos, I do a Villa-Lobos, yeah, I'm doing that. Villa-Lobos is a very important composer, I think. I love Piazzolla. I'm not doing any Piazzolla on this recording because I just feel like it's been recorded a lot. And for the most part, I'm trying to find pieces that are not so popular so I can introduce people to them. But I play a lot of Piazzolla for fun. You know, I don't know. I don't know that I would say I have a favorite composer. I have favorite pieces, maybe.
Okay. How is your routine as a pianist who has achieved such a success?
I think any instrumentalist, soloist, we're a little bit slave to the instrument, you know, where we have a ball and chain to our leg holding the piano everywhere, every step we take. But I'm not, I don't practice, you know, I'm not one of these people that practices 6, 8, 10 hours a day. It's very rare that I will practice 6 hours a day. That's a very lot for me. I'll do that if I have a lot of pressure, a lot of concerts, a lot of repertoire. I have to learn something fast, you know. I prefer, when it's possible, to live with music, you know. I don't know, I mean, but on the other hand, I do practice play every day, pretty much. I mean, I don't like to go on a vacation that much usually because I can't practice. Even if I'm not going to practice, I don't like knowing that I can't practice. I like to know there's a piano near me. So I prefer to go on, if I go on a holiday, I prefer that the person has a piano or there's a piano nearby I can practice on or something. I mean, so much of my life is arranged around pianos. I mean, if I'm traveling, I mean, this is what the managers are doing, you know. He gets here, he's the flights, the hotel. When can he practice? He needs to have practice here, he needs to have practice there. When can he be in the hall? You know, everything is, you know, I get an itinerary if I'm on tour, and it's all about, you're practicing here, this is your practice time, this is, you know, the flights, the hotel, the practice. You know, that's, you know, it, you know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, my routine, I mean, I prefer to not get up early in the morning, but unfortunately I do sometimes. You know, I teach, and so usually my schedule when I'm in Boston, I try to teach 2 days a week. So they're long days, but I take care of all my students and a studio class that way, 2 days. So those 2 days, I don't practice a lot. If I need to practice in the evening, I'll practice, you know, after I come back from conservatory. But the other days, I try to leave days open. I like to have stretches of free time so that even if I'm not practicing all the time, I can read, I can practice, I can read, I can practice, I can go take a walk with my dog, I can whatever. I mean, I don't know.
You
Is
were
that a routine?
also the head of department and piano professor at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. How do you feel about passing your legacy to your students?
Um, you know, I mean, as I said in the beginning, when I talked about my teachers, I mean, there's a legacy. I mean, there's from Fleischer, for example, there's a straight shot to Beethoven. Beethoven, you know, taught Czerny, Czerny taught Leschetizky, Leschetizky taught Schnabel, Schnabel taught Fleischer, and then there I am. And that's, what was that, 6 degrees, 6 steps? And Beethoven was born in 1770. So I feel like, you know, and I can trace myself to Liszt, I can trace myself to all sorts of people, and I would like to think that I've absorbed these traditions and the knowledge that I've been so privileged to receive. And a lifetime of studying and thinking, you know, I'm always thinking about music, always. I'm always reading about music, I'm always listening. Just, you know, music is always going through my head. Sometimes I can't sleep, I just can't get something out of my head. It's very common. And so for me to have students, gifted students, who I can share my life passion and study with and pass it on and shape them. And not just, also it's important to me not just the musical part, but the personal part, you know, because there are teachers who are not that involved with their students, they just teach them, and they're, you know, and I'm not that way. You know, I mean, I had different relationships with all of my teachers, but I want to be a good papa to them. I want to be there for them personally. I care about how they're doing personally, psychologically, emotionally. Help them if they have any problems. I just want them, I want to take care of them. When somebody is my student, and even beyond, because many of those relationships just keep going and never stop, and it's family, we call it studio family. You know, it's very important to me to have them, to nurture them and teach them and love them, and I get so much from them too. It's very much a two-way street.
So I would like to thank you so much, Maestro, for taking your time to talk to me. That was a very beautiful experience for me, and I'm very honored because I have heard so many recordings of yourself, and in all the recordings, I was very touched. I felt very emotional, and I knew that you are not just a wonderful pianist and a wonderful professor, but you are also a wonderful person because of the heart, because of the sound of your recordings. So I feel extremely honored, and I said to myself, I need to meet this person. I really need to meet this person. And I feel very honored for having this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Always happy to answer questions and talk to you.